Okay, let's jump right in. Picture this. You're on the banks of the Hantangang River in Pocheon, South Korea. It's this huge area, like 260,000 square meters, just bursting with flowers.
Right, a massive garden festival. And the sources we looked at mentioned huge crowds, maybe 100,000 people showing up over just a short period.
Exactly. This is the 2025 Pocheon Hantangang River Spring Garden Festa. It's set in this really beautiful spot, too, UNESCO World Geopark. So on the surface, it sounds amazing, right? A total success story.
Oh, absolutely. The descriptions really paint a picture. They call it a flower palace, like a giant natural palette just spread out there.
Yeah, and they talk about it being completely packed, especially around, I think it was June 6th, a holiday weekend.
That's right, visitors just everywhere taking it all in.
You read about people just wandering, through these endless fields of lupinus and tulips, taking tons of photos.
And the big suspension bridge, they mentioned the Y-shaped one. That was clearly a huge hit.
Oh, yeah, the longest in Korea, 410 meters. People getting their life shots. That's the term they used. Unique.
Capturing that perfect photo. And the view of the Hantangang River from there was described as a spectacle.
Totally. We even have quotes from visitors. Someone from Seoul, I think, a student. They mentioned how easy it was to get there. Good roads.
And that feeling of just openness, the riverbank view, giving you that, ooh.
Right, like your chest just opens up.
Yeah.
That sense of release. Yeah, sounds idyllic.
It really does. But, and this is where our sources introduce a really interesting angle, almost a paradox.
Go on.
Well, alongside all these descriptions of beauty and crowds and success, the sources repeatedly mention that the garden itself was, well, unfinished.
Unfinished.
Yeah, the specific Korean word they use is unfinished.
Okay, wait. How can this massive festival, this flower palace drawing, like 100,000 people, be called unfinished? That doesn't quite add up.
Exactly. That's the core puzzle presented in the material we have. And that's really what we want to dig into today.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to figure this out. What did unfinished actually mean on the ground? What went wrong, or maybe not wrong, but what were the challenges?
And who was working behind the scenes to make it happen, even with these issues? And ultimately, what does this tell us about putting on these kinds of huge public events?
Okay, let's use the sources as our map then. So despite the amazing overall impression, the articles do point out flaws, if you look closely.
Yes, definitely. While the main flower displays were vibrant, the sources note that in certain parts of the festival grounds, signs of incompleteness were noticeable.
Like what specifically?
Things like parts of the main lawn square still being just, well, sand, not grassed over yet.
Okay.
And they mentioned seeing cracked asphalt in places, even some broken marble flooring, little things maybe, but visible rough edges.
So it's this contrast, these stunning flowers right next to areas that clearly weren't quite ready.
Precisely. And it feeds back into that core description. We found the garden wasn't presented as this perfectly polished, finished thing on day one.
It was still, what was the phrase, being made?
Yeah, chabyota.
Still in process, even while it was open to the public.
Okay, so why? Why open it if it wasn't totally done? Was it just bad timing or?
Well, the sources give some pretty clear reasons, and it seems less like bad planning and more like battling against circumstances.
Like what?
A big one was the opening date, May 3rd. That was chosen very deliberately.
For the holiday week.
Exactly. To catch the May Golden Week holiday crowds. That's a huge period for tourism and visitors in Korea. Plus, they wanted to get ahead of the summer rainy season, which usually kicks off mid-June.
Makes sense. Plan for the best window.
But then, nature threw a curveball. The sources talk about Kungoan Ezubao, a sudden, really severe cold snap that hit in mid-April.
Oh, wow. After they'd already planted.
Yes. And it apparently killed off a large number of the flowers that were already in the ground, the very things the festival was built around.
That's devastating. And on top of that, the Hantangang River area itself, especially in early spring, is known for being pretty harsh climatically. Cold, windy, just tough conditions for getting young plants going.
So, okay, you've got this ambitious deadline, a tricky climate anyway, and then a free cold spell wipes out your work. What do you even do?
Well, this is where the story shifts to the people involved, specifically the staff at the Pocheon City Agriculture Technology Center. The sources really highlight their efforts.
What did they have to do?
Faced with that disaster and the May 3rd opening looming, they basically had to replant massive sections urgently.
I can't even imagine.
The sources use this phrase, IU, which essentially means they were pulling all-nighters, working around the clock for days just to get enough ready for opening day.
It's just incredible pressure.
And crucially, the sources emphasize their work didn't stop when the gates opened. They were out there every day, planting, gardening, improving things, even with thousands of visitors walking around.
So the garden was literally growing and changing day by day while the festival was on.
Pretty much, yeah. And there's another fascinating detail about how they manage this. It speaks volumes about their approach.
What's that?
Apparently, starting back in April, instead of buying mature, expensive flowering plants from nurseries, the kind that cost, as the sources put it, Buda, potentially several dollars each.
Right, which would add up incredibly fast for that scale.
Exactly. They decided to buy flower seeds directly and grow their own seedlings in the Ag Center's own nursery.
Wow, that's way more labor intensive, surely,
Yeah.
but much cheaper in terms of raw cost.
Absolutely. And the sources frame this choice very intentionally. There's a quote calling it the invisible effort by staff trying to save even a penny of citizens' taxes.
Ah, so it was a conscious decision to put in the extra sweat equity to be fiscally responsible.
That's the clear implication. You not sir, no, you no sir, that unseen effort to save taxpayers' money.
And they were working through holidays too.
Yes, the report specifically mentions staff giving up their holidays, staying on site to keep the work going. The hardship of the staff who guarded the site returning their holidays.
That level of dedication is just, wow.
It really is something. And despite all this, despite the unfinished patches and the behind-the-scenes scramble, what was the visitor reaction like, according to the sources?
Overwhelmingly positive, actually. That's another surprise at heart. People seemed genuinely happy, impressed with the scale, the flowers, the view. They focused on the good stuff.
Interesting. So the imperfections didn't necessarily ruin the experience for most people.
Apparently not. And the city officials seemed aware of this whole picture. The mayor publicly acknowledged the staff's hard work, the holiday sacrifices.
Did they address the unfinished aspect directly?
Yes, and he promised they'd listen to visitor feedback and aim for a more evolved appearance, Uche, for the next event planned in the autumn. So framing it as a learning process.
Which seems like a reasonable approach. What about safety? With huge crowds, especially on that bridge.
Good point. The sources do mention that. The local Pocheon fire station did safety checks before opening, and importantly, there were always safety personnel stationed right at the suspension bridge because it got so crowded, managing the flow.
That's crucial. Okay, so you have positive visitors, acknowledged issues, safety measures. What about the staff themselves? How did they feel about presenting something still in progress?
There's a really insightful quote from one staff member. They said that seeing the garden change and become prettier little by little each day. Chuan So-yun Wana was actually part of the festival's unique charm.
Huh. So they embraced the process itself.
It seems so. Their goal, they said, was to show the garden's most beautiful appearance by the closing date, June 15th. Not necessarily on opening day.
That shifts the perspective quite a bit, doesn't it? It wasn't about a static reveal, but a journey.
Exactly. When you pull all these threads together from the sources, the picture that emerges is not just of a flower festival, but of something actively growing, Hantangang, and being made hisorni in real time.
It's this combination, this interplay. You have the incredible vitality of the flowers themselves, mixed with the very human sweat and effort of the people tending the site. The Sonaya.
It becomes a story about resilience, really, adapting on the fly. They faced a major setback with the cold damage, had this tight deadline, and instead of, postponing or scaling back drastically, he just kept working, improving it day by day, even while the show was on, adapting.
Right. So, wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway here from this deep dive into the Pocheon Festa?
Well, the sources show us this event that was, by many measures, a huge success. Massive crowds, stunning visuals, lots of happy visitors.
But crucially, it was also fundamentally a work in progress. Its success wasn't despite that, perhaps, but maybe somehow connected to it.
Yeah, it's a testament to overcoming those unexpected challenges. Through sheer hard work, some clever thinking like growing their own seedlings, and this continuous process of improvement.
We see this really beautiful outcome, but the sources reveal it wasn't achieved through one perfect moment of completion before opening. It came through ongoing effort, adapting to difficulties, and this commitment that lasted the entire time the festival was running.
Which leaves us, and you, with a final thought to chew on. If the beauty of the Pocheon Garden Festa was intertwined with its process of becoming the daily effort, the visible growth, the adaptations, Maybe the true value of things isn't always just in the perfect, polished end result.
Right. What if the journey, the effort, the struggles involved in making something hold a significance all their own? Maybe even more than the finished product sometimes.
It's an interesting perspective. Where else in life, maybe in your own work or goals, could viewing things as a dynamic process of growth, rather than just chasing a fixed endpoint, change how you approach them? Something to think about.